Good morning. Let's see what the Lord has in store for us this morning. We're in John chapter 21, verses 1 through 11 this morning. And really, we're coming very quickly to the conclusion of the Gospel of John. In fact, it's this study and next week's study, and that's all. I'm not sure exactly. I'm thinking about Thessalonians. But pray that the Lord will just put us in the right place that He wants us to be in. Excuse me. Final chapter in this wonderful study. It presents Jesus Christ as the Son of God. And to many, this epilogue seems as though it's been tacked on. Because if you look at chapter 20, it concludes with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And John signs off by saying, "These things were written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and believing you might have life through His name." A seemingly logical conclusion to his gospel presentation. And yet John throws us a curveball, and he goes up to tell us one more story. Why? There's a couple of possible reasons if you think about it. John 21 provides validation of ministry because you see, although Peter and John would go on to travel together in ministry and labor together, there would be those that would question Peter's ministry due to his denial of the Lord previously. And John seems to write this epilogue, including this final story, to let us know that our God, being the God of the second chance, applied and applicable to Peter's ministry, was particularly and singularly commissioned by the Lord. And then secondly, John 21 provides a correction of a misunderstanding. That is, word had gone out throughout the early church that John wouldn't die before the Lord's return. And we'll see John address this issue as we get towards the end of the chapter next week. Now, as we look at this, what's going on, Jesus has risen from the dead. He's appeared to Mary and the women, the disciples on the road to Emmaus, and twice to the group of disciples in the upper room. Those appearances all took place in Jerusalem. And yet, Matthew records that Jesus had instructed the disciples to meet Him. If you want to read it, it's Matthew 28, verse 7. But Jesus had instructed the disciples to meet Jesus up north in Galilee, where He'd spend some time with them, up there in that area. And so with that as a backdrop, we're going to look at verse 1. After these things, Jesus showed Himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, which is another name for Galilee. And in this way, He showed Himself. So Jesus showed Himself once again. And I really like that idea because I don't know about you, but my desire is that Jesus would show Himself again and again and again to me. And to you as well. And to the church too. Robert Gale, the famous congregational minister with numerous degrees, was preparing a special message for Easter Sunday. And there were going to be hundreds of people that would hear this message, this particular address. And so he worked extra special hard on polishing it and making sure that it would really come together in delivery. He had, Robert Gale did, a historical faith. But later he said that on that night before Easter Sunday, that his historical faith became hysterical faith. as he realized that the Lord is truly alive, it just dawned on him, the touch of the Lord on his life. And I read something that, and was thinking, not only do I hope I have a hysterical faith, but I hope that you have a hysterical faith as well. Historical faith says Christ lives, but hysterical, radical faith says Christ lives in me. In Galatians chapter 2, verse 20, he says, I have been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I that live, but Christ that lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I've been crucified with Christ. No longer I that lives, Christ lives in me. The life which I now live in the flesh is lived by faith in the Son of God. But in addition to that, the ones that he greeted were Simon Peter, verse 2, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples were together. Interesting that 7 of the 12 disciples were fishermen. I find that interesting that Jesus seemed to be drawn towards choosing fishermen to be his disciples. And I think for good reason. Fishermen by nature must know how to persevere through both calm seas and stormy weather. The same is very much true of ministry. If you want to serve the Lord, you've got to learn to serve him. As Paul would tell Timothy, in season and out of season, Timothy, be instant. Be ready for whatever the Lord might bring your direction. Whether the sun is shining or trials are abounding in your walk, we must be like fishermen who, regardless of the weather, make their way to the sea, working in teams. Fishermen were those who could take commands. They could receive instruction. One would tell the other where to cast the net and when to draw it in. Certainly those of us who want to be used by the Lord must be those who work as a team and take commands easily, perhaps more than any other occupation, any other endeavor. Fishing requires patience. So too, those who minister for the Lord must be those who are exceedingly patient as they wait for the haul to come in, for the load to come in. Now, aside from the 7, 2 of the disciples in the boat are unnamed. Why is that? I think maybe it allows you and I to take our place with these disobedient renegades. A lot of times we look, and I've shared with you, when we're studying through the scriptures and you find a character, that you insert yourself into one of the characters, or more than one of the characters that are in the story that you're reading, that you're learning from. And this fits really nicely because there's no names. You can just say, Brian, in the boat, unnamed. In order that you might take your place. Because we too have found ourselves going fishing when we should have been on the mountain. You say, well, what mountain, Joe? If you go to Matthew chapter 28, you find that Jesus specifically told his disciples to meet him in Galilee at a mountain that he had appointed. But where did these disciples go? They went fishing, but they went to the beach. I think they probably for a time lived in Santa Barbara. But they went to the beach, rebellion, because the Lord wanted them to be up at the mountain. Therefore, maybe your name fits one of these unnamed disciples. Mine certainly does as the other. Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. And they said to him, we're going with you. This cracks me up. Peter was just that guy. Hoof and mouth disease. Just not only did he say what he was on his mind, but he just did. So with everything that was going on, he just flat out came out and said, I'm going fishing. And they said, we're going with you. There's a frustration of ignoring Jesus' commands. The last thing that Jesus had told these guys to do when he appeared to them in the upper room, in John chapter 20, verse 21, then said Jesus to them again, peace be unto you. As my Father hath sent me, even so I send you. 3 years ago, prior to this, Jesus said he would make them fishers of men. During the time that Jesus was with the disciples, he was constantly preparing them for the day when they would go out and they would start preaching the gospel. Just a few days prior, he had told them to get going. It's time to go. Scoot. And so they got going, but they got going in the wrong direction. They got going to fishing. That's not what John meant. He didn't mean to go back to their fishing boats. And as a result, they're catching absolutely nothing. And I say, how frustrating, extremely frustrating, when you're not doing what you know the Lord wants you to do. It might be something as simple as getting up early enough in the morning to spend time in the Word. And when you don't, your day becomes extremely difficult. It might be something as important as sharing the gospel with someone you ought to be sharing it with. Think about Jonah. Jonah said no to God and ran as far from Nineveh as he possibly could. He ended up frustrated in the belly of a well. And instead of catching fish, the fish caught Jonah. Have you ever been ignoring something that Jesus has been telling you to do? It's no wonder that you're frustrated about it when you get yourself in that position. The problem, though, with going off on our own excursions is that others are affected by our little detours that we take, our disobedient side trips. And Jesus warned us about setting our hand to the plow in Luke chapter 9, verse 62. If you set your plow to hand to the plow. Don't look back. Why? If you've ever done any plowing, you know that you can't do a straight line when you're looking forward, because your plow is going to follow where your eyes are going. And so Luke said, forgetting that which lies behind, I press on. Luke 9:62. Paul also talked in this way in Philippians chapter 3, verse 13. But Peter here is looking back, and looking back will paralyze you guys, just like it did with Lot's wife. Verse 3 goes on to say they went out and immediately got into the boat. And that night. It's not surprising that the disciples entered the ship at night, because it's always dark when you say, I wonder if I should go back to the old gang. I wonder if I should go back to the old ways, the old habits, the things that I used to do, and try to pick up where I left off. So I wonder if I should go back to the old ways and the old spots. Truly, guys, whatever you go back to, it's always dark. And the result is very telling when it says there in verse 3, at the very end, they caught nothing. Isn't that what we've found when we go back? Isn't that what we've discovered when we go back to the old ways, the old spots? It's just not there anymore. What used to be there, it's just not. Or it doesn't work any longer. And you come up empty. But when the morning had now come, Jesus stood on the shore. Luke chapter 1, verse 78 tells us that the daylight was breaking, for the day spring was observing. And that he who was observing was Jesus Christ. Yet, looking at this one that was observing the goings on, the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Then Jesus spoke to them and said to them, "Children, do you have any food?" Now, backsliders, no. Rebels, no. Ex-apostles, former disciples, nope. What does he call them? Verse 4, 5. Children. It wasn't dopies. It wasn't you idiots. It wasn't, it's like any number of things that we would have used that were not used. They answered him, no. I think by this time you start to go, well, do we? You know a lot more about it than I do. But they answered him no. And here's where a true miracle takes place. When asked if they had caught anything, these fishermen answered no. That doesn't make a lot of sense, because fishermen always say something. The nibbles have been fabulous. Or you should have seen the one that got away. They got something to say. They're professionals, professional fishermen. And so here's where a true miracle takes place. But there comes a point in life when you go back and you realize it stinks. That there's nothing there in that place that you were going back to. In that place that sounded so good to you as you reminisced about the wind blowing in your hair. You know, that there you are. You're just down there by the dock in your chair, and the wind is kind of just blowing in your... well, some people. The smell of fish is wafering down. I know I don't like fish, but it sounded good. It sounded like a good thing to get into when you thought about it. But when you actually got there, it wasn't the way that you thought it would be, which happens with so many things in life. And so it sounds good, but it just doesn't come up. And I think Satan, one ability that he has the ability to remind us of the kicks of the old ways. But what he fails to bring to mind are the kickbacks that inevitably follow. He's really good at that. And he said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast, and now they were not able at this point to draw it in because the multitude of fish. So there they are. They come out in. Jesus is on the shore. He says, cast. Do you have any meat first? No, I don't know any meat. So take the net and cast it on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some. So they cast, and now it was so full that all of them together were not able to draw it in because of how many fish there were. Get it on the right, and you'll find. Why the right? Because whatever Jesus says is always right. But they cast, therefore, verse 6, and now were not able to draw it in for the number of fish. Think about this. For those of you that have been toiling, working, wondering when it's going to happen. Success, that is. For these disciples, were only a boat width away. 3, perhaps maybe 4 feet from one side of the other boat to the other. One side of the boat to the other. Wasn't a very big, huge area. That's how close they were to success, though, in this fishing endeavor that they involved in. And you might be just 3 or 4 feet away from seeing success happen in your life, in your ministry, in your occupation. You could be so close. How do you make 3 or 4 feet? How do you move it to make all the difference? How do you enter into success? That's what we're constantly being pushed towards. Told it's so important. But the Lord had other things in mind. Mr. Getty, asked the eager young man. Mr. Getty, what's the secret of success? Mr. Getty said, it's very simple. Rise early, work late, strike oil. man looked at him and said, "How do you strike oil?" You might as well say, "Well, how do you find success?" You do what Jesus says. Listen to what he's telling you in your heart. Perhaps he's been dealing with you. Maybe he's been speaking to you about certain issues, but you've thought his direction doesn't relate to the challenge that you face or the endeavor that you've undertaken. The disciples could have said, and most of us would have said, "Hey, buddy, we've been fishing all night. We're experts." We're experts in what? Night navigation. What do 2 or 3 feet have to do with anything? What's the position of the boat have to do with anything? Well, we've been trying it all night. We're professionals. We do this all the time. I'm sure the Lord was laughing, chuckling. But when they did what he said, what happens when we do what he says? Huge difference. Just that obedience, that yielding to the Lord. But when they did what he said, they were immediately on the right side. There's Wednesday nights we've been going through Deuteronomy. And we've been hanging out in chapter 30 for a while. But it has to do with this issue of success, simplicity. And what an important issue it is, just that God has set before man that issue of life and death. And the exhortation that the Lord gives, to choose life. God has set before man life and death. He is setting before you today, each day, life and death. And then God will exhort you. He would exhort you to choose life, that it might be good for you and for your descendants. I can't for the life of me understand why or for what reason a person would choose death. Being involved with the chaplaincy, quite a few suicides and natural causes. I always had that discussion. Why? It goes against everything that man desires. Breath, life. Now, I've heard a lot of flimsy excuses, but never a good one. Along this subject, I'll just read portions of Deuteronomy. Chapter 30, verses 11 through 14. For this commandment, which I command you today, is not too mysterious for you, nor is it far off. It's not in heaven that you will say, who will ascend into heaven for us? Bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it. Nor is it beyond the sea, that you should say, who will go over to the sea for us and bring it to us, that we might hear it and do it. But the word is very close to you. It is in your mouth, and it's in your heart, that you might do it. Where does success come from? By aligning yourself with the heart of God. Amen. We try so many different ways to beat the system, thinking one thing over another is right. A1's going to save us. A1's a steak sauce. What's up with that? They must not have had a, what's that? Rights to it. Copyright. Now don't get caught up in saying who will do this and who will do that, who will go across the sea. And Paul the Apostle picks up on this in the 10th chapter of Romans, talking now concerning salvation. And he says himself, you shouldn't say, who will ascend into heaven and bring it down? Or who will go out across the sea and bring it to us? But the Word of God is near you. In fact, it's in your mouth. For if you confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So salvation is closer than you realize. You know God doesn't put out a bunch of hoops and say, jump through these hoops and you'll be saved. Go kill a dragon and go get 7 golden apples and you'll be saved. Or kill the multi-headed dragon, or whatever. No. Salvation is very close to every one of us. It isn't far off that you're going to have to make some great pilgrimages to India to be able to find it, or you don't have to go to Mecca. It's very near to you. It's actually as close as your mouth. All you have to do is confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord and believe in your heart God has raised him from the dead and you'll be saved. That's just how close you are, anyone is, to being saved today. And it's interesting that people can be that close and yet such a distance away, 1,000,000 miles from the gates of peace, with just one little step from God. You might be running, you may have run from God all your life, run away from God just as fast as you could all your life. And you think, man, I put a lot of distance between me and God. You're wrong. He surrounds you. You can't get away from him. You can deny him. But all you have to do is turn back. And you'll find him standing right there. He's close. And so it's not too difficult. It's not too mysterious. It's not somewhere in heaven, not somewhere across the sea. Very close to you he is. All you have to do is with your mouth confess. And so God's word, Paul says, Moses says to these people, it's very close indeed to you. And so today, look and see before you life and good, death and evil. And that I command you today to love the Lord your God. And so these are the things you do and you are to do. First of all, you are to love the Lord your God. Secondly, you're to walk in his ways. And thirdly, you're to keep his commandment. You want success? This is where it's found. I've set before you life. How can I have it? By one loving God. 2, walking in his ways. 3, keeping his commandments, his statutes and his judgments. And if you do, the Lord your God will bless you in the land which you're going in to possess. But if you turn your heart away so that you do not hear, and you are drawn away and you are worshiping other gods, serving them, I announce to you today that you will surely perish. You will not prolong your days in the land which you cross over to the Jordan to possess. I call heaven and earth today as a witness that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your descendants may live. Deuteronomy 30, verses 16 through 19. What an important issue that God has placed before man. That's what really blows my mind, is that he places it before you. And he's setting before you today life and death. And then God exhorts you, choose life, choose, come on, choose life, choose life. Really? That what? That it might be good for you and your descendants. That it might be successful, that it might be good, that it might be right. That it might be that which pleases the Lord. Again, I can't, for the life of me, understand why or for what reason a person would choose death. But yet people do. Again, that you might love the Lord your God, that you might obey his voice, that you may cling to him, for he is your life and the length of your days, that you may dwell in the land which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac and Jacob, to give to them. Verse 20. So too, you might be very close to success in the best sense of the word. All you have to do is to decide to obey what Jesus has told you in your heart. It's not mystical, it's not difficult. It's not secret. It's just a matter of saying, you have been telling me in my heart that I'm to do a certain thing, Lord. And now I'm purposing to do it. Verse 7, therefore, that disciple whom Jesus loved said unto Peter, it is the Lord, it's the Lord. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it to go fishing, and plunged into the sea. So here's the contemplator, the mystic John. Here's Peter grabbing his coat and diving in the water. The doer, the activist, Peter. But the other disciples came along in the little boat, for they were not far from land, but about 200 cubits, dragging the net with the fish in it. I'm not going to let go of this. Can you imagine? Just let go of the fish, all right? Just let it go. They called them literalists. Then as soon as they had come to land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fish laid on it, and bread. So the other disciples in the little ship, not far from land, dragging the net with fishes, As soon as they came to the land, they saw the fire, the coals, the fish that were grilling thereon. All night long, the disciples had been looking for fish, when all the while, Jesus had it right at hand, freshly grilled, lightly lemoned, but it was ready to eat, and it's probably the best fish you could have ever had. Haven't you discovered that to be so? Haven't you discovered over and over again, when you go off on your little excursions, that when you come back to the Lord, you find in Him. You find in Him what you've longed for all along. Oh, dope. That's what I wanted. Grilled fish. The Lord has a way of doing that. Verse 10, Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish which you just caught." Simon Peter went up and dragged the net to land, full of the large fish, 153 in number. It's a lot of fish. And although there were so many, the net was not broken. Bring of the fish which you just now caught. We'll cook it up. Make it a nice meal. You know, in verse 6, the disciples were not, did you notice? I think I pointed it out to you. But they were not able to lift the net. All of them. 7 of them. And yet the same word is used here in verse 11 to say that Peter, what did Peter do? Oh! Peter was able to draw it all by himself with the Lord's help. What kind of help? What kind of help? What He commands you to do, He'll enable you to do. How much the Lord desires to do that and get us to learn how to depend and rely upon Him. Peter was able to draw it in. And in drawing the net, Peter did single-handedly what the group could not do collectively. How? There's only one explanation, because the command of the Lord was given. What He commands you to do, He will enable you to do. If He tells you to lift up those fish, then you better lift up those fish, because He's going to enable you to do it. Therefore, what the disciples couldn't do in their own strength, Peter could do by himself, simply because the Lord had said, "Bring in the fish." The Word of God speaks, and it is the very source of power to do what He asks. He will give you dunamis, the power to do things that you're not able to do yourself. And get this little caveat here. There's 153 fish. Why would you do that? You know, you could meditate on that all day. Probably not come up with a good answer. But we know that there were many. They could have just said a plethora. How many fish? Plethora. How many people you have in church? Plethora. And there were so many that the net was not broken. So why is the number of fish recorded, and why are we told that the net was not broken? Pretty cool. Earlier in a similar miracle, Luke says that when they took in a miraculous haul, the net broke. Luke chapter 5, verse 6, if you want to look at that instance. This, though, speaks of evangelism, in case you're wondering. In the gathering here at Calvary Concord, or in crusades you go to, the gospel is preached and the hall may be taken in. But not all who respond will continue on and keep going. In the parable of the soils, only 1 in 4 goes on to bear abundant fruit, Matthew chapter 13. Consequently, when 60 or 80 people are baptized on a Sunday morning, not everybody's going to be bringing forth fruit abundantly. But of those who are truly in the kingdom, of those who are brought to shore, not one will be lost. Each one will be accounted for exactly. Therefore, as the scenario unfolds, Jesus shows Peter and John that they are not only fishers of men, but tenders of sheep. In the arena of evangelism, we cannot deal with statistics because we can't see men's hearts. But in shepherding ministry and pastoring and discipling, or even parenting, we must account for every sheep. We must be aware of the brother and sister in need of tending, of touch, of care. Whose job is this? It's each of our jobs. Those of us who love the Lord have the joint responsibility of saying, where's 151? 151, where are you? Where is he? Just here a second ago. I got to go find him. And here Jesus makes a transfer in Peter's thinking, showing him he's to be not only a fisher of men evangelistically, but he's also to be a tender of sheep pastorally. He's to carry these things on. Good stuff. Let's pray.